1 slime, 2 training dummies, 1 dirt block. What if I told you that you could beat the entirety of Terraria by doing nothing with just these 4 items? Well, you can't. However, I'm still going to show you how to beat Terraria by doing absolutely nothing. Please note that this is going to be bosses only, not the actual entire game. Also note that this is not going to be a guide for all the bosses. I will only be fighting the bosses that are required to beat the game. Another important note is that this is going to be an expert mode playthrough. Expert mode is the hardest difficulty that you can play Terraria on. All of the bosses receive extra attack, health, and defense. They also gain some additional attacks. I will also try to explain as much as possible, so if you are somewhat new to Terraria, fear not. I will try my best to make sure you feel welcomed. With all that out of the way, let's grab our Luigi caps and follow the wise words of the Magic Conch.
Oh, Magic Conch Shell, what do we need to do to get out of the kelp forest?
Nothing.
The shell has spoken!
So right away in the beginning, I'm actually going to go against my word and fight King Slime. King Slime is technically not required, but defeating him will give us some important items for later on. For those that may have struggled at all with King Slime, just do this little trick and he is now a complete joke. King Slime isn't really that hard, but this strat just takes things one step further, allowing you to completely walk all over his grave. When starting a new world in Terraria, you are given 2 choices. You can choose to have your world contain either Crimson or Corruption. These are evil biomes that each contain their own unique enemies and items. One of these items you can make is a pickaxe that can be used to mine hellstone in the underworld. The only way to get the pickaxe though is to fight each of the biome's respective bosses. But what if we were able to just ignore all of that? What if there was just some way to breeze through half of the game with just one simple trick? It doesn't seem likely, but let's just grab our fishing rods just to be sure. Through fishing, we are able to obtain the Reaver Shark, which is capable of mining hellstone. It's honestly quite amazing just how much of the game you can skip just by fishing. And unless you are a speedrunner, this method is always going to be faster than actually fighting the other bosses. But with that out of the way, let's go fight the next boss. Oh wait, it would appear that our armor is not strong enough to withstand Skeletron. What was all that fishing pointless? Well, let's just grab the slime. So this is the power of the 4 items that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. For some reason, bouncing on top of the dummies with the slime mount will give you invulnerability. I will only use these if I can't think of a way to defeat the boss. There is no pre-hard mode gear that will allow us to survive Skeletron. His head does tons of contact damage. It would only be possible with mid-game gear. With Skeletron out of the way, we now have access to the dungeon, which is going to be important for the next boss. Inside the dungeon, we will find the mechanic, which will allow us to buy wires to create mechanisms, traps, etc. This is very important, as we are going to use wires throughout the rest of this playthrough. Standing before us is just one more boss. After defeating this boss, we will gain access to hard mode, the whole other half of this game. This boss is the Wall of Flesh. This boss took me a long time to think of a way to beat it AFK. After a while, I genuinely thought it would be impossible, but I stuck through it and eventually I found a way. For those that may not know, the Wall of Flesh is a boss that takes up about 1/3 of your screen. It is impossible to go behind it, as it will always push you back in front of it. This boss can also only be fought in the underworld. Any attempt to leave will result in you getting dragged straight back into hell. The most important note about this boss is that it will move at a constant rate in a single direction, so you might be able to guess why it took me so long to figure this one out. Like, not even the OP slime strat would have worked, and that is why I was so worried. I thought the run would end at this very point. At first I tried to set up with teleporters, but halfway through I remembered you can't actually get teleporters until after Wall of Flesh. Then I tried using conveyor belts, but then I found out that I don't have access to those yet either. After many hours of thinking, I realized that I was thinking too much and the answer was much more simple than I ever thought it would have been. can't believe the answer was that simple. I just could not see it. For Terraria veterans, you might notice the blocks I used are from the Lizard Temple. Technically, you are unable to get inside the temple before Wall of Flesh. But let me just show you this cool trick that I do almost all the time. Isn't that so cool? I don't know the exact science behind it, but what I can tell you is that slopes in Terraria are busted, and the game freaks out and tries to place you somewhere. I also chose to go with the spiky ball traps because they have active hitboxes, and if I box them in a certain spot, they will always be hitting one of the eyes. Now, technically, you don't have to kill yourself. I just think it's funny how the Wall of Flesh is the only boss that stays alive after you die. So, we finally made it into hard mode. The bosses are extremely harder, they do much more damage, and they have much more defense. At this point in the game, our loadouts are going to be very important, and the setups are going to have to be much more elaborate. Our first obstacle stepping into hard mode is going to be the mechanical bosses. So let's start with arguably the easiest mech boss out of the three. Destroyer of Worlds is no doubt the easiest of the three mech bosses, as long as you know how to exploit him, of course. He has the most health out of any boss in the game, but sadly he has one tiny flaw. Destroyer of Worlds is made up of multiple segments, allowing you to hit multiple segments with a single attack, effectively multiplying your damage. This in turn makes him very weak to piercing weapons, and also a large number of projectiles. For this fight you're going to want the Palladium armor. For accessories, I went with the Cross Necklace, Worm Scarf, Frozen Turtle Shell, Charm of Myths, Moon Shell, and Moonstone. All with warding, of course. For this fight, I'm going to use spiky ball traps, as they are piercing projectiles and I spawn lots of them at once. And up by me I have a crab spawner for my summon to kill for hearts, as well as some spear traps to kill the probes that come near me. This fight does have a bit of RNG with the probes, so if you are getting a little unlucky, you can just heal yourself during the fight. But yeah, the spiky balls completely demolished the destroyer, a complete piece of cake. Next up, I decided to fight the twins. This is a somewhat tricky fight. Retinazer will shoot you with lasers if you are not turning enough, and Spaz will catch you with fire breath if you are not moving fast enough. This fight was my favorite one to figure out, and I will get to that in a second. First, let me show my loadout. For this fight, I'm using the same loadout from the destroyer fight, as well as a similar crab setup. As you can see, I also have very many traps set up. Let me just show you how the fight goes real quick. You may have noticed that something seemed off. Let's look at how the twins normally look when they are attacking you. Now, let's look at the twins during this fight. So this is why this is the coolest fight. So Terraria has a projectile limit to prevent lag and frame drops, but both of the twins' attacks count as projectiles. So by maxing out the number of projectiles on screen, we can effectively make the twins useless. I really like this one the most because it puts one of the game's tactics against itself. So now we just have one more mechanical boss, which is Skeletron Prime. Now, I really wish I could hype this one up, but unfortunately it falls under the same problem as Skeletron. His head does way too much contact damage, not even the endgame gear gives us enough defense. So sadly for this fight, we will have to use the slime. After defeating all three mech bosses, flower bulbs will start appearing in the jungle. Breaking one of the bulbs will spawn the next boss, Plantera. This one probably makes me the most sad due to how close it gets to working. If Plantera didn't have a second form, this would have a chance. The main problem is that in her second form, Plantera deals as much damage as Skeletron Prime's head. So for this one, we are going to have to use the slime. Having Plantera defeated allows us to go inside the temple to correct away and lets us spawn the next boss, Gollum. For this loadout, all the accessories will be the same, but this time for armor, we're going with the turtle armor. I also have the Deadly Sphere Staff and the Frost Hydra Staff, both with Ruthless modifiers. For this fight, you want to build a trap box slightly above yourself, so that when the Golem spawns, he will either spawn inside the box or he will spawn below it and then jump inside of it. While he is in the box, he is only able to hit us with his fists and his lasers. This fight isn't that scary because his damage output is barely faster than our heal output. With Golem defeated, the cultists will now spawn at the dungeon entrance, and defeating them will grant us the next boss fight, which is the Lunatic Cultist. So one thing I want to share is that I've never laughed this much in a long time. Lunatic Cultist is one of those bosses that can be difficult because he can do a lot of damage, and he is very hard to hit. It's really funny just how easy he becomes when you fight him by doing nothing. For this loadout, all the accessories will be the same, but for the armor we will have the full Valhalla set, as well as the Ballista Staff. The Valhalla set is probably the strongest armor we can have currently. The chest piece gives a massive regen buff, and the set bonus gives us extra sentries, as well as increasing the effectiveness of the Ballista. Allow me to show you the Ballista without the set bonus. And now, here's the Ballista with the bonus. As you can see, the bonus is simply far too great to pass up, and it is what makes this fight extremely easy. With Lunatic Cultists out of the way, all that stands before us is just one more boss.
Your mind goes numb. You are overwhelmed with pain. Otherworldly voices linger around you. Impending doom approaches.
The Moon Lord. One of the most intense bosses you will ever face. With a boss that takes up your entire screen, you've nowhere to run. Your only option is to stand your ground and fight. Your attempt to muster up courage fails, as you feel your legs give out. And now you are left trembling in fear from what stands before you. You've but one last option. Just do nothing. You're not quite sure why, but you can tell it is what must be done. So there you stand, doing nothing. You begin to feel as if nothing can stop you. That's it. You are filled with determination. Alright, before I get too distracted by storytelling, let's go through this fight. This loadout is oddly specific, so bear with me. We have the Valhalla breastplate and leggings, the Chlorophyte mask, cross necklace, worm scarf, celestial shell, celestial stone, sunstone, frozen turtle shell, and for the weapon we have the Stardust dragon staff. We also are boxed in because many of Moonlord's attacks can't go through blocks. Also, before you ask, I added the spiky ball traps as a joke. They don't affect the fight at all. So the main trick with this fight is that Moonlord doesn't move unless you move. We can heavily abuse this by using the Stardust Dragon, which does constant contact damage. And yeah, that's pretty much it. The final boss becomes a complete joke by using this setup. It's honestly surprising just how easy he becomes just with this simple setup. I just can't believe it, dude. I really can't. Before I end the video, I want to add some final thoughts. First off, if you are new to the game, please do not beat the game like this. Terraria is such a fun and unique game, and it has so much to offer. The boss fights in this game are very creative and impose many interesting ways to defeat each one. The main reason I did this was that I was simply curious to see if it was possible, and as it turns out, it very much is. But yeah, don't make me quote that one Sekiro guy now. Play the game properly. Also, I want to give a shout out to Crabbar, a well-known Terraria YouTuber. I got the AFK Moonlord loadout from one of his older videos on it. Thirdly, if you want to see more Terraria content or more content of this manner, just let me know, and I will see what I can do. And last but certainly not least, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, comment, all that jazz, and yeah, I hope you have a good one.